Thank you for that kind introduction. Again, my name is James Polli. I'm from the University of Maryland, and I'm really pleased to be here with you this morning to talk about results of a survey from earlier this year, where many of you actually participated. And one thing I would just encourage you to do is to please visit the website of the Center for Research on Complex Generics. It's located here at the bottom of the screen, which again is a collaborative agreement between the University of Maryland, University of Michigan, and the Food and Drug Administration. One reason why I and Anna are so pleased to be here with you this morning is because we're really very interested in knowing what research you think is needed. And I know there's some five critical questions for today. At some level, they might be able to be summarized as what research is needed, and which in part is what this survey is about. For example, this survey asked three questions in particular. What products are necessary for further investigation to help the development of complex generics? What techniques or tools are needed? And also what training is needed. And I think hopefully you'll find that the survey was very informative. But having said that, and Anna will talk about this more next with regard to some of the informational sessions that we conducted with companies. But in general, I'd say there's still a need for greater specificity in general, as far as at least us being able to help in terms of executing research and putting on educational programs and that sort of thing. Although obviously this center is really just less than 1 year old though. Okay, so this is sort of an informational slide. So the mission of the Center for Research on Complex Generics is to increase access to safe and effective generic drugs through enhanced infrastructure and communication, education, and research collaboration across industry, academia, and the FDA. And this is maybe more of a slide for future reference in case anyone subsequently asks you, what does this new center do? And again, I would just encourage you to at least check out our website at Complex Generics, where we'll be putting more information up. One thing we'll mention is that we do have an educational program in August. That information, I think, is up by now, and more will be following. Okay, so one component is training. So, for example, we have plans to do webinars, workshops, hands-on laboratory demonstrations, student-centered events, public outreach, and complex generic scholars program. And I guess the one thing in this slide that I would like to mention in particular is hands-on laboratory demonstrations. So, for example, at Maryland and Michigan, and certainly we look forward to other partners. There's lots of research and laboratory facilities, and we'd like to use those facilities to demonstrate critical techniques. But of course, the question is, which ones should we do? So just going back a couple of slides about how very interested in learning as much as possible today about, with some specificity, what research is needed, what training is needed. And again, for example, this survey was informative, but I would also say that obviously it doesn't answer all of our questions. Okay, in terms of what we do have planned, so this first year wasn't exactly the one that we had initially planned, but we are at the point where we've got some workshops planned, including coming up in August 18th through 20th. One in the topical dermatologic area, in vitro release testing, IVRT, and in vitro performance testing, IVPT methods, best practices, and scientific considerations for ANDA submissions. In September and October, one on mechanistic modeling, regulatory utility of mechanistic modeling to support alternative bioequivalence approaches. And then in late November, one that's kind of more focused on long-acting injectable products, best practices for establishing the suitability of model integrated approach to demonstrate bioequivalence of long-acting injectable products. And I think at this point, all these are free and open to the public, and I think for this first one we do have at least preliminary information, including registration at complexgenerics.org. So please visit it, that website. Okay, and of course there's also a research mission. I think, for example, we do have capabilities, long capabilities at least the two universities to do industry-sponsored research. But of course, the center is a federally supported, FDA supported. So I can't say we do research that aims to help promote the interests of say, one company in confidence. So not here to really talk about that. Talk about things that we do sort of publicly. Again, I think I mentioned about laboratory demonstrations. So of course, there's some bleeding between research and training. Also interested in doing pilot lab projects, sort of research on smaller scale about feasibility of methodology. I think the one I just want to emphasize a little bit is Research Scientist Program for OGD staff and generic companies. So again, kind of going back to the theme, what specifically do you think we can do to be helpful? If you think that there's, we certainly are interested in training the public, generic companies, including FDA staff. So if you think there's certain techniques that are maybe innovative techniques that would be helpful for the OGD staff to be familiar with, we actually are very interested in that. And if you have specific examples of that, please let us know. Be glad to leverage the facilities that we have. In terms of research that's being just initiated now, there's two here. One deals with doing laboratory studies to better parameterize oral drug absorption mechanistic models. For things like food effect, it's important how to incorporate micelle activity. So that's what that's about. And also another project with regard to better understanding of a liposomal injection product, including release testing. Okay, so that's a little bit of introduction about the center. Although maybe I forgot to mention maybe a critical part. Again, it's a collaborative agreement between two universities. And we're open to involving other experts at other institutions, the University of Maryland, University of Michigan, and the Food and Drug Administration, and which, again, the intent is really to add on to the portfolio of what OGD currently already does. So hopefully it adds value. Okay, so transitioning now to the main event here, talking about the survey of scientific challenges in the development of complex generics. We really had three main questions. Again, much thanks to many of you for participating in this survey. One question is, which complex products should we focus on? Again, we're excluding biologics here since that's not within the domain of our interest in the Center for Research on Complex Generics. The second and third questions were, which techniques and tools should we focus on? And the third question was, what training should we focus on? But with regard to this first question about which products to focus on, each participant was allowed to select up to two. So when you see some of the results, they add up to more than 100% because folks were able to select more than two. In fact, the vast majority of participants did select two. And the options here were complex injectable formulations and nanomaterials, complex mixtures and peptides, drug-device combination products, inhalation and nasal products, long-acting injectables and implants, ophthalmic products, and topical dermatologic products, as well as other. The second question, as I think I briefly mentioned, was which analytical techniques and tools to emphasize now. Again, excluding biologics, that's not within our domain in this collaborative agreement. And the options were data analytics and machine learning, locally acting physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling, oral absorption models and bioequivalence, quantitative clinical pharmacology, and patient substitution of generic drugs, as well as the other category. And the third question dealt with educational topics. And folks were able to select up to 4. And the answers, the potential answers were really just a combination of what we saw in the first question with regard to products and what we saw in the second question with regard to techniques. So again, just kind of emphasizing that any one person was able to select up to 2 and 4 with regard to questions 1, 2, and 3 that concern products, techniques, and educational topics. We also asked some demographic information. We want to know who was answering the questions, at least in terms of the demographics. One question was, were you willing to be a point of contact for your company? And much thanks to the almost 50 people that were willing to do that. And we also ended up doing analysis, as you might imagine, among some of these demographic questions about the answers that people provided. We also asked a employment perspective question of the respondents, and there was 13 options. For example, were they a generic drug industrial scientist or manufacturing personnel? Were they an executive or management person in generic industry? Were they, for example, scientists at a CRO, CMO, or CDMO, etc. We also asked people about the number of employees at their company. That ranged from 1, I think, all the way up to over 10,000 employees at their company. And then an additional demographic question concerned about their employer's interest. And there was 11 different options, and folks could select any that applied. For example, a lot of respondents worked for an API manufacturer. And they were also a finished dosage form manufacturer. And then, of course, there was other types of options to select from also. In terms of methods of this survey, again, there was 3 main areas of questioning that concerned which products to focus on now for the center, which analytical methods to focus on now for the center, and which educational topics to look at. This survey was approved by the University of Maryland IRB. It was open to the public at our website, complexgenerics.org, during essentially the months of December 2020 and January 2021. We emailed the information about the survey so people can go to the website to our growing email list. Again, I would encourage you to sign up if you're not already done so. Really much thanks to the many organizations that created awareness of the survey. I think in general we're actually quite happy with the survey response, in no small part because of several organizations. There was only one required question to the survey, and that was consent. If people didn't consent, then the survey was terminated. And with regard to the results, brief mentioning of some of these statistics, we perform stats in SAS, relying on the chi-square test largely. And since we had lots of questions, we corrected for multiple comparisons by Bonferroni correction. Okay, in terms of demographics who responded, we had 281 examined responses. That is, there was 281 respondents who provided consent and answered a question. Something that was a little bit surprising to me, so we had quite a few people who gave consent and then didn't answer any questions. I guess there's a term in real estate called looky-loo, people who kind of want to look through the house but just there to maybe see, which was just fine. But we didn't count those people as being respondents. Over half of all respondents were, including so-called points of contact, were generic drug employees. So we think we hit things pretty well there, although we were broadly interested in hearing from the public. Respondents were equally distributed between being employees at companies with less than 1,000 employees, as well as over 1,000 employees, although there was a slight tendency for points of contact to be from larger companies. A majority of respondents were employed by finished dosage form manufacturer, and about 1/4 were employed by API manufacturers, and in many cases they were one and the same. Again, we did do quite a few comparisons. For example, we compared the responses of employee points of contact as well as non-points of contact. I think we had almost 50 points of contact, individuals who are willing to represent their company. And just kind of looking at some of the results here, there was actually never an effect. So points of contact and non-points of contact gave pretty much the same answers. At least we couldn't tell the difference. We also looked at employer interest as being variable in terms of responses. And in the area of analytical methods, there was a difference between generic drug employees and non-generic drug employees. Maybe the thing that was most surprising to me in terms of demographic effects were company size. Where company size, for example, large versus small, had the biggest effect, and in fact it impacted results in all three question areas. And maybe many of you are perhaps not surprised by that. But yep, we'll take a look at some of the results. So here's maybe the most informative slide of this presentation. Here are the top 3 replies from all respondents. Again, we have questions about which products to look at in terms of emphasizing for the center, analytical techniques to look at, and educational topics to focus on. And in terms of just rank order, first, second, and third. And before I start talking about what's in this table, I should probably say I don't want to overemphasize this either, because maybe this is a theme, is really there's quite a few product areas that were demonstrated to be interested, I'd say, across this survey. Nevertheless, I think we can say there was a rank order in terms of what was sort of on top. And for the question about complex products, here they are: complex injectables, formulations, and nanomaterials. Second place, drug device combination products. And third place, inhalation and nasal products. Educational topics, which was really the options were just pooled responses options from the first 2 questions, mimicked the responses for educational topics was really very similar to complex products. Same first entry here, top entry, same second top entry here in drug device combination products. And then coming in third here, which kind of matched the analytical techniques, third place was data analytics, including quantitative methods and modeling and simulation. And with regards to this second question, analytical techniques, coming in first was locally acting physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling, oral absorption models, and bioequivalence in second, and then data analytics and machine learning in third. So I think this is going to have some effect as far as what priorities are. It doesn't quite answer the question, what specifically should we be doing. So I will talk a little bit more about that, and hopefully I hope to learn more today about that level of detail. Okay, let's before we sort of dive into some of the tables, let's take a look at some of the findings. For complex products, points of contact and non-points of contact didn't give any perceived differences. Employer interest was also not a factor, whether what the employer's activities were. For example, generic drug employees didn't differ from non-generic drug employees. Companies with more than 10,000 employees did differ from all other companies in terms of inhalation and nasal products, where they emphasized that more compared to the smaller companies, I guess. And there also was a difference between large and small companies. What I mean by large is over 1,000 and small, under 1,000. With regard to larger companies, did emphasize complex injectables, formulations, and nanomaterials. With regard to, in terms of additional summary findings for analytical methodology, that second question, again, points of contact and non-points of contact didn't differ. Generic drug scientists did differ from all others in terms of emphasizing locally acting physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling. Generic drug executives did differ from others in terms of the other option. I think maybe 1/4 said There's other analytical methods that need prioritization. So again, just going back a slide or two to look at the top three, I'm not sure that tells the entire story at all, actually. Although having said that, it's nice to have some prioritization. Also, in terms of analytical methods, large company versus small company did differ with regard to locally acting PBPK modeling, with large companies emphasizing this as a relative priority. With regard to the third question, educational topics, points of contact and non-points of contact did not differ again. They never did for any question. Employment interest was not a factor. Didn't matter whether you were a generic drug employee or not. Gave the same answers as far as we could tell. There were some differences with regard to company size. Companies with more than 10,000 employees did differ from all others with regard to locally acting physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling, as well as data analytics. There was a fourth question, harmonization, which was, we'll take a look at those results, very, very highly supported. So overall, definitely would have to say that these results will help prioritize the center's research and training efforts. Okay, let's take a look at some of the results in tabular form. So think with regard to the first question about complex products, again, individuals were able to allow to select up to 2, and the vast majority did do that. Red here indicates what came in the top 3. Again, complex injectables, formulations, and nanomaterials, drug device combination products, and inhalation nasal products. But again, I would have to say many of these other areas did receive substantial voting, shall we say. I'm not an expert on ophthalmic products, but which is a somewhat narrow area, I would have to say, but still 13% actually did tally for that. And then taking a look at complex products by number of employees, again, larger companies, those with more than 1,000 did have a preference to emphasize complex injectables, formulations, and nanomaterials, as well as inhalation and nasal products. With regard to the second question, analytical techniques, again, in red here is showing and these are shown in terms of order in which they appeared in the survey, as in the last slide also. These are the top 3 that we talked about. But again, I think maybe I would just emphasize that, just because it's not in the top 3 doesn't mean it didn't receive some substantial support. Here's a topic I happen to be personally interested in: patient substitution in generic drugs, with a quarter of respondents selecting that for at least one of their two tallies. Looking at this question about analytical techniques by employer type, showing some of the larger employer types here in terms of who responded. Generic drug employees did put an emphasis on locally acting physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling, and generic drug executives did put some greater emphasis on the other category, seeing a need for techniques that are not reflected here. Continuing with our discussion about analytical techniques based on number of employees, so larger companies, those above 1,000, and in particular those with more than 10,000, gave a little greater emphasis for locally acting physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling. Going to the education topic, in red here are the top 3 that we previously discussed. I guess the other thing that would just sort of jump out at me would be a number of areas actually did receive really quite a bit of support otherwise also. So clearly there's lots of needs in this complex generic space. And just showing some of the demographic information about educational topics, in particular, number of employees, maybe nothing here. Maybe look at this later at your leisure. In red here, we see data analytics as well as locally acting physiologic-based pharmacokinetic modeling being more emphasized by the largest of companies. was just very, very high support for harmonized approach when it comes to complex generics requirements. You can see the numbers here. And I guess my 2 cents would be this is sort of something that's probably hard to ignore. I think I understand that individual agencies, for example, the likes of the FDA, do need to worry about their sort of home country, maybe even prioritize that. But having said that, these numbers are really very, very supportive of always keeping this harmonized international approach maybe in mind. So that was a brief tour of the survey. Really super thanks to all those who participated. If there's a need, if you think there's a need to maybe do this again in maybe 10 years, 2 years, please let me know. Again, much thanks to the several organizations that create awareness of this survey, since it is, I think, going to be informative. Again, getting back to maybe a generalized question today about what research is needed. Again, hopefully you found this survey very helpful, but I guess I'd also quickly point out of the limitations of the survey. It probably doesn't give us the granularity in terms of maybe things that we can decide to do. And in fact, as Anna will describe, we did do some reach out to companies, have some informational sessions, which definitely were provided a lot of helpful insight, and hope to learn more exactly about what specifically merits attention today. Again, please contact us. Again, my name is James Polli, and I will be speaking next. We're the co-directors. Also, a very important person is Vishal. She's the manager for the center. Please email us, and also please visit our website and sign up for the listserv. Thank you very much.